Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. All of Delmarva's towns have interesting histories, and Milford, Delaware is no different. One minor footnote in the town's storied past is that President Warren G. Harding, while visiting the region in 1923, was initiated into a local Masonic lodge at the Plaza Theater in Milford. There are a variety of interesting people who hail from Milford, like the poet John Laughlin, who we have previously covered on this show. 7 of Delaware's governors have lived in Milford, including Governor Ruth Ann Minner. There's also a Civil War general named Alfred Torbert, who called Milford home. A West Point graduate, he had a mixed military record. He was offered a commission in the Confederate Army, but chose instead to join the Union side. He led a number of successful battles during the 1864 Shenandoah Valley Campaign. His troops had to rescue General George Custer's division in what became known as Custer's First Last Stand. Torbert's commander, General Sheridan, was sometimes frustrated by his lack of initiative. After the war, Torbert did not receive another military commission, so he became a diplomat. He died while traveling in Mexico when the ship the City of Veracruz was caught in a hurricane off Cape Canaveral, Florida. You can see a statue of General Torbert and an exhibit about him at the Milford Museum. Milford was incorporated February 5, 1807, but the area in and around Milford was first settled in 1680 by Henry Bowen on what was known then as the Sawmill Range. A century later, the Reverend Sydenham Thorne built a dam across the Mispillion River to generate power for his grist mill and sawmill. Reverend Thorne and a number of other property owners decided starting a town would be an effective way to bring in the people and businesses that could help their ventures to succeed. Thorne's dam, the mill, and everything that followed were centered on a place travelers had been using to cross the river, a ford, leading people to call it the Mill at the Ford, and eventually the town became known as Milford. Reverend Thorne had been born on Virginia's eastern shore and was an ordained Episcopal priest. He was extremely popular with his parishioners at Christ Church in nearby Mispillion Hundred. He was also ardently loyal to the Church of England and the King. On February 13, 1777, the Treason Act was amended by the General Assembly of Delaware, forbidding clergy from preaching against the fight for independence. In addition, they were prohibited from praying publicly for King George. Their vows prevented them from following the new law, so they had to step down and let laypersons preach with the restrictions required by this act of censorship. If you've just joined us, this is the Delmarva Almanac. I'm Dana Kester McCabe, and we're talking about the history of Milford, Delaware. After the war, Reverend Thorne's business interest in Milford continued. He petitioned the legislature to waive his taxes and to codify this for all clergy, since that had been the practice in the previous government. Delaware's lawmakers turned him down on both requests. Thorne turned his attention back to his religious calling. In 1782, he had a church built in St. Johnstown, also known as Church Hill Village, in northern Sussex County. This town has long since disappeared. Around this time, Thorne bought a house in Milford, which is still known as the Parson Thorne Mansion. In 1790, he decided to move his church to Milford, which was now thriving. He supplied the white oak timbers from his own land and had them milled at his own sawmill. He had been preaching in Dover during that time period. Despite his effort to build a church closer to his home, he asked the church hierarchy to reassign him to Wilmington. He never got to see this or the finished church in Milford, passing away in 1793. Without his leadership, work on the church foundered, and it was not finished until 1835. Beside Reverend Thorne's mills, several others were built nearby. On April 23, 1802, Nathan Willey, along with a group of his neighbors, applied to the legislature for a license to operate the grist mill they had just completed. Grist mills were an integral part of the agrarian economy here during that time period. They were also closely regulated. Over many centuries, millers often had a poor reputation for dishonesty. Some had been known to cheat their customers, skimming off more than their contracted share of what they milled, or for having weights and measures that were inaccurately in their favor. There is no indication that Delmarva's millers of that era were anything but upstanding citizens, but the regulations helped to keep them in check. Nathan Willey's mill must have been in good standing with his customers. It thrived and kept up with changing technology. Its water wheel was replaced in the late 1800s with a turbine. It passed through several owners before it got to Ainsworth Abbott in 1919. He installed a diesel engine so the mill could operate even when the water level of the mill pond was low. He operated the business until 1963, when the state of Delaware purchased it to preserve it as an historic landmark. In 1976, it was renovated. 456 acres were added to the original 27, including Blair's Pond Nature Preserve, the Isaacs and Green Preserves, and the Marvel Salt Marsh Preserve. Today, it is Abbott's Mill Nature Center, and it is leased and operated by the Delaware Nature Society. They host a variety of programs on nature and the mill's history throughout the year. On April 7th, they'll have the latest in their astronomy series, providing telescope stories and a campfire. If you'd like to find out more about Abbott's Mill and the history of the town of Milford, visit our website, delmarvaalmanac.com/history. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. Be sure to follow us on Facebook or Twitter, and next week join us to learn more about our local culture and get connected to our natural wonders. If you'd like to become an underwriter for this program, visit delmarvaalmanac.com/support. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and underwriters eatdrinkbuyart.com for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.